Tonight, I'm going to prove to you that the country is clearly and indisputably liberal. Now, here are the people that don't get it. Everyone in Washington who insists that the country is center-right when it is no such thing. And Republicans. Exhibit A is House Speaker John Boehner. The Wall Street Journal explained today, quote, House Speaker John Boehner says he's determined to offer a budget this spring that curbs Social Security and Medicare despite the political risks, and that Republicans will try to persuade voters that sacrifices are needed. Boehner wants to cut Social Security and Medicare. Now, how many times do we have to go through this? People don't want to cut Social Security. Look at the polls. They want you to cut the deficit by raising taxes on the rich. That's not me. That's the American people. The polls couldn't be clearer. But wait till you get a load of this latest poll. The Program for Public Consultation, part of the University of Maryland School of Public Policy, decided to do something really different and revolutionary. They said to the voters, you do it. You do the federal budget. After all, it's just basic math. The amount of money the government spends versus the amount of money that the government takes in. Do you know what the pollsters discovered? Americans did a way better job at reducing the deficit than the politicians did. Guess what else they found? Americans are totally liberal. Now, they might not identify as liberals, and they might even identify themselves as Republicans, but most Americans are united in what they value. Now, let me give you the numbers and the examples. These are the things that they said should be increased. Increase in spending in pollution control at 17%, 18% increase in humanitarian assistance. Then the numbers get really big. A 92% increase in higher education, 110% increase in renewable energy, and 130% increase in job training programs. Look, the American people want us to make an investment in jobs. It's obvious. But they also want cuts. And where do they cut? Well, defense spending. 26% cut from the military operations in Iraq and Afghanistan, 18% cut from weapons purchases, and 15% cut military aid to other countries. What's the total? The American people cut spending by more than $145 billion. Now, that's excellent work. The Republican budget slashers can only dream of a number that big. But Americans didn't say mission accomplished. They, unlike the Republicans in Congress, are actually serious about deficit reduction. So they aren't happy to just cut spending, they also raise taxes. 65% raised corporate taxes and 75% raised income taxes. And not just on the super rich. A majority of people raise taxes at least a little bit on people making over $100,000 a year. The American people actually believe in shared sacrifice. So here's the bottom line. When the American people did the budget, they cut spending by more than $145 billion, and they increased revenues by more than $291 billion. So the total deficit reduction was a whopping $437 billion. Nicely done. Now, if all of that was not clear enough for you, I'm going to give you one more poll. Because look, the whole country's like, oh, no, you don't understand. It's center-right. No, it's not. Look at the NBC News Wall Street Journal poll. These are the things that they said are acceptable. The top scorers, number one, they said ending tax breaks, 81%, eliminate earmarks, cut defense funding, end big oil tax cuts, and end tax breaks for people making over $250,000. Those are the things they find acceptable. Are you ready for what they find unacceptable? Coming in at number five actually, is cutting unemployment benefits. And then this is in order of priority. Cutting Head Start, cutting student loans. They don't want any of this. Cutting heating assistance to the poor, cutting Medicaid, cutting Medicare, cutting education, cutting Social Security. They're saying, don't do it. Those are the things we don't want cut. And those are exactly progressive priorities. Absolutely in line, all the polls that you look at. So now you know that's the reality. The country is progressive. The country is liberal. The only place that isn't is Washington, D.C. Joining me now is economist Peter Morici. He's professor at the University of Maryland. Professor, thank you for joining us.
Nice to be with you.
You know, I look at that poll and I think, God, can it get any clearer? Am I missing something? It looks like the American people are pretty darn liberal based on those numbers.
I think you're missing a lot. I mean, they did elect, what, 90, 95 Republicans to Congress last year because they were upset that the... Wait a minute, they didn't elect that many?
No, I'll tell you that is, we're beginning with a false premise.
Oh, I guess you get to talk and I get to listen. Okay, I understand
We're just getting started. Hold on now. I'm going to give you a shot. But I'm saying it's a false premise because, look, just because they elected them doesn't mean that they have the same priorities.
Can I finish then? Can I finish my thought? You've had a nice
go for it. Have at it, Hoss. Go ahead.
Okay, hold on. They elected lots of Republicans, and it was a reaction somewhat to Barack Obama's liberalism. What we tend to find is that Americans are much more moderate than either political party or the networks with their slants will admit. If we have a Democrat in the White House who's very liberal, they tend to get disgusted and show in polls that they're not happy, they were against health care and so forth. Now the Republicans have come to town, and they think their victory means that they can slash spending all over the place, get rid of government regulation, cut taxes, and the American people will be happy. That's not true either. Americans tend to be more moderate than leaders of either party will acknowledge, or than either Fox or MSNBC will embrace.
Professor, I'm going to challenge you with facts. The facts I just gave. Is it a so-called moderate position in Washington for an overwhelming majority to say, raise taxes, raise them, cut defense spending? That is not what Washington considers a moderate position. If it was, I would love it. I would agree. The American people are right there in the center, right? But Washington would call that incredibly liberal. Are you kidding me? If Obama proposed that, the Washington media would lose their minds.
I do have the burden of having read the results of the poll. And it's also fair to say that Americans talked about raising the retirement age. That's a way of cutting Social Security. They did reject the national sales tax, something that Nancy Pelosi and Barack Obama salivate to have. So I think that what
they wanted to raise other taxes.
But what I think what they're talking about is shared sacrifice. They want to cut spending in places, and they're willing to cut spending on things that affect them. Also, they're willing to increase taxes, but they most would like to increase taxes on other people, wouldn't we all? So if you ask the majority of Americans, should we increase taxes on people making more than $100,000, you're going to get a yes vote because most people make less than $100,000.
Wait, Professor, then why don't we do it? We live in a democracy. Why don't our politicians represent us? If a great majority of us want to raise taxes on people making over $100,000 because we're in a real budget mess, why don't we do it?
Well, now we're getting someplace. The seminar is making progress. What we're seeing here is that we.
I love your condescension. It's hilarious. Go ahead, finish up.
Well, I'm trying to bring you along now. What we're seeing
I showed you the numbers. You haven't showed anything yet. Go ahead.
No, I've shown quite a bit. You just don't want to acknowledge it. What we're seeing here is that political leaders on both sides tend to view their election as mandates for extreme positions. Barack Obama is much more liberal than the population would like.
That is 100% wrong. I just showed you the numbers.
Well,
Barack
let me
Obama
finish.
is way to the right of the country. The country is saying positions that are much more progressive than Obama.
That's
I know you got glasses on. Can you not see? We just showed you the numbers. It comes from your university.
Wait, I had nothing to do with the poll. I'm in the business school.
That's obvious.
Okay, which is a good thing.
Your position is indefensible. Go ahead.
Okay, the country's also not as conservative as Speaker Boehner would like us to believe. Right now, the Republicans are in town. They're pushing a hard right agenda, and the American people are responding in polls. Just as when President Obama came to town and he wanted health care, well, the majority of Americans didn't want that health care law passed, but he forced it on us anyway. I mean, we get this kind of back and forth. So I think that it's unfair to say that Americans are extremely liberal or extremely conservative. If they were extremely liberal, they wouldn't have booted the Democrats out of office for passing health care. That is a fact.
Economist Peter Morici, thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.
I appreciate it. Even though you've been completely and utterly wrong, and you have not supported the facts
That's
at
what makes
all.
America America.
I showed
we
facts.
both can be wrong.
All right, last thing on this. And we appreciate you for joining us. I just want to make this absolutely clear, okay?
Absolutely.
I'm not, when you say, oh, well, they elected Republicans, so they must want conservative principles. No, the Republicans spent millions upon millions of dollars that they raised from incredibly rich people so that they could do ads pretending to be on the side of the American people. What did they campaign on? We showed it earlier in the show. They said, oh, we're going to create jobs. They come in, they don't create jobs at all. They trick the American people. You know that in elections, it turns out commercials make a difference. They do political
spending. That's why Barack Obama can raise so much money on Wall Street.
I agree.
Wall Street supports Democrats for a reason. They get their way. I mean, the Democratic Party is the party of Wall Street.
Okay. Look, I actually agree with that, but then you're agreeing with me that they're too conservative. All right, Professor, we got to go.
Take care.
All right. Thank you. We'll be right back.